started. Could everybody mute yourself, please? This is going to be the first real test because there's we got 4 chapters and there's lots of stuff in them, as you can tell if you've read it. I'm going to talk about 2 people that come from 2 books. This is William Barclay, who's an Anglican theologian, which I'll use, and then this guy is named David Levy. And somebody gave me this book when I was doing the course before. He's a much more conservative guy, graduate of the Moody Bible Institute.
Oh my goodness.
University of Illinois, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, which it's either in Pittsburgh or Dallas. I'm not sure. Pittsburgh will be the Episcopal one. He is a foreign field director of the Friends of Israel in Eastern and Western Europe. So anyway, I'll use him a little bit, just as it's a different sort of slant on the interpretation of Revelation. So we're going to start with chapter 4, and Tom, you're the first person on my screen. Could you read, Wendy, read verses 1 through 3? Chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. You're muted. You can't hear you.
Okay. You want me to read chapter 4, 1 through 3?
Right.
Okay, 1 through 3. All right. After this, I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I had first heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the Spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven with someone sitting on it. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. A rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne.
Great, thank you. So this is a second vision. It's different from the first vision. Remember, the first vision was to write the letters to the churches. So this is a totally different vision, and John is being summoned into the throne room of heaven. Barclay says, likely this door is from earth to heaven. Primitive Jewish thought pictured the sky as a vast, solid dome set like a roof on a square, flat earth. And the idea here is that beyond the dome of the sky, there's heaven. And there's a door that's open in that dome to give the seer, John, entry into heaven. So he gets into heaven and he sees the throne. In heaven, he saw a throne and God on the throne. The throne of God is a common Old Testament picture, but John saw the one seated on the throne. Something very interesting here. John makes no attempt to describe God in any human form. He rigorously shuns anthropomorphic details. And that's consistent with the Jewish premise of not even saying the name of God. That God was so reverent, if you saw the face of God, you would die. Carrying on with Barclay, John sees his vision in terms of the lights which flash from precious stones. We don't know exactly what these stones were. The 3 names here are the 3, and Tom read one as ruby, which in my book says carnelian, jasper, sardinium, or carnelian, and emerald. They were typical of the most precious stones of the age. The jasper we see now is a dull and opaque stone, but in the ancient world, it was a translucent rock crystal through which the light would come with an almost unbearable radiance. Sardinium was called that because it was said to be found near Sardis. Was blood red, was a gem which was frequently used to do engravings. And then the emerald is most likely the emerald that we know. And he says it may be that the jasper stands for the unbearable brightness of the purity of God. The blood red sardinium or carnelian stands for his avenging wrath, and the gentle green of the emerald stands for his mercy, by which alone we can meet his purity and justice. Any other thoughts on the first 3 verses? We're going to 4. Who did I say? Margaret, would you read verses 4 through 8?
Around the throne are 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones are 24 elders, dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. Coming from the throne are flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder. And in front of the throne burn 7 flaming torches, which are the 7 spirits of God. And in front of the throne, there is something like a sea of glass, like crystal. Around the throne and on each side of the throne are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. The first, no, that's 3. Isn't that 3, 4, 5, and 6? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please. In fact, go through 8.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature with the face like a human face, and the fourth living creature like a flying eagle. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and inside. Day and night without ceasing they sing, Holy, 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 the Lord God the Almighty, who was and is to come.
Great, thank you. So he's in the throne room. He sees around the throne, around the major throne, 24 thrones. Seated on the thrones were 24 elders in white garments. We've heard of the white garments in our letters to the churches. It means purity. Golden crowns on their heads. So 24 thrones and 24 elders. Let's see, I'm going to use Barclay again. On the 24, he says there's 5 lines of explanation. In the Old Testament, there are indications of a kind of council surrounding God. So this may be like that council. He says there are so many priests in Israel that they couldn't all possibly serve in the temple at one time. So they were divided into 24 different courses, which you hear in Chronicles. Each of these courses had its president, who was known as the elder of the priests. And so the 24 elders may stand symbolically for these 24 courses of priests. If you remember in the story of the angel coming to Zechariah, Zechariah's group is serving in the temple at that time, and he goes into the Holy of Holies, and he has this vision, and the angel says, well, your prayer has been granted. And he says, how can that be? And the angel strikes him dumb. He can't talk until John the Baptist is born. He gets struck dumb, and Mary, nothing happens to her when the angel comes to her, and she says, how can this be? Anyway, that is another example of the one of the courses.
Well, my book says that it's the 12, that the 24 are the 12, where'd you go? 12 patriarchs of the Old Testament and the 12 apostles of the New Testament.
Yeah, that's the next one. That's the 4th one.
Oh, sorry.
Suggested that the 24 elders stand for the 12 patriarchs of the Old Testament, the 12 apostles of the New Testament combined. And then Barclay says the most likely explanation is that the 24 elders are the symbolic representatives of all the faithful people of God, which is why you would have 12 from the Old Testament and 12 from the New Testament. So it's a symbol of completeness. And another, just to finish that point, Barclay says, why 24? The answer is because the church is composed of Gentiles, Jews and Gentiles. Originally 12 tribes, but now it's as if the tribes were doubled. So you've got the 24 elders. Then you hear from the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder and these torches of fire. All this is typical Old Testament description of God, kind of like God is described at Mount Sinai in Exodus. Then we hear before the throne was a sea of glass like crystal. The sea of glass appears in prophetic visions of God's throne, again in Exodus and Ezekiel, and it's the floor of heaven and the ceiling of the created universe. This is through which John saw this door open to the throne room. Then you've got these four creatures. The four living creatures. Here we come, this is Barclay again. Here we come to another of the symbolic problems of Revelation. The four living creatures appear frequently in the heavenly scene. So let's begin by collecting what Revelation itself says about them. They're always found near the throne and the Lamb. They have 6 wings and are full of eyes. So the implication is they see everything, kind of like Santa Claus right before Christmas, right? Sees what you've been doing.
Santa Claus, just like every mother can see everything their child does.
Exactly. They're constantly engaged in praising and worshiping God. And a lot of this comes from Ezekiel. The 4 living creatures have 4 faces, which come from Ezekiel: the face of a man, the face of a lion, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. And they support the firmament. They're holding it up. The rims of the wheels that they're on are full of eyes. That's in Ezekiel 1:18. In Ezekiel, the 4 living creatures are definitely identified with cherubim. The cherubim were part of the decoration of Solomon's temple, hanging on the veil that shut off the Holy of Holies from the holy place. So they were protecting, or they were in the temple to protect the Holy of Holies, kind of like God placed the cherubim to protect Eden when Adam and Eve were expelled so that they could not come back. So, and again, going on, what do these 4 living creatures symbolize? 4 living creatures stand for everything that is noblest, strongest, wisest, and swiftest in nature. So it's the best of the best. The idea of nature praising God is one which occurs in the Old Testament many times. The heavens are telling the glory of God. The firmament proclaims his handiwork. Kind of reminds me that you'll know that song, This Is My Father's World, which Maltby Babcock wrote. Beautiful, beautiful song about nature and how important nature is. There's a tremendous truth here. The basic idea behind this is that anything which is fulfilling the function for which it was created is praising God by fulfilling that function.
Did we skip over the rainbow part? I
The
can't see
rainbow,
it right in my notes.
the rainbow I've read is symbolic of God's mercy. In the midst of all this judgment is God's mercy. And you'll remember the rainbow after when God said after the flood, I'll put my bow in the sky and when I see it, I'll be reminded and I'll never flood the world again.
Well, the E of M papers just say that it's rainbow is God's covenant with the whole of creation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it.
That was God's covenant after the flood.
Okay.
Oh, Toby,
Yes.
when I read about those 4 creatures, it reminded me of the four gospels. You know, the symbol for the 4 gospels are,
Each of
and
the
so
4,
I thought that was a neat way to connect the Old Testament and the New Testament. But I don't see that in my notes. I don't see that anywhere. That's in my head.
Each of the evangelists was, or has historically been assigned one of these symbols. In fact, if you go to, I guess it's Nazareth, where the church of, not the Annunciation, the church of the birth is, which is a church to Mary. On each of the four corners is carved the ox and the eagle and the lion and the man is the evangelist. Each one of those is associated with one of the evangelists. So let's go on. Kay Mayback, you said you're leaving early. Why don't you read verses 9 through 11, chapter 4, verses 9 to 11.
And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to the one who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall before the one who is seated on the throne and worship the one who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive the glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created."
Right, thank you. So Barclay says, here's the other section of the choir of thanksgiving. We've seen the living creatures stand for nature and all its greatness, and the 24 elders for the great united church in Jesus. So when the living creatures and the elders unite in praise, it symbolizes nature and the church praising God. John uses a picture which the ancient world would know well. The elders cast their crowns before the throne of God. In the ancient world, that was the sign of complete submission. And you will remember this line, we cast our crowns from Holy, 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 which we always hear on Trinity Sunday. That's it. So the doxology of the elders praises God on two counts. He is Lord and God, even more meaningful to John's readers than it is to us. God is Kurios Kai Theos, Lord and God. And that was the official title of Domitian, the Roman emperor. So here's another example of a reason that the Christians got persecuted is they attributed the titles that were given to the emperor to God or to Jesus, which was not good for the empire. And then on the second score, God is creator. It's through his will and purpose that all things existed even before creation and were in the end brought into actual being. Only God can create something out of nothing. That great truth means that in a very real sense, everything in the world belongs to God, and there's nothing that we can handle which God has not given to us. Any other thoughts on chapter 4?
Toby?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the title that the emperor had that they gave to the Lord?
It's in Greek, it's Kurios, K-U-R-I-O-S, which means Lord, Kai, which means and, Theos, T-H-E-O-S, which means God. Theos is the root of theology, the study of God.
Okay.
Toby, I have a question.
Yes,
when you were talking about the four creatures representing the noblest, strongest, wisest, and what was the fourth? What did the eagle represent? What quality was that?
Maybe the fastest.
Could be.
Any other questions? Getting pretty close then. Let's go to 5. Who wants to read? Lawson, I see you want to read chapter 5, verses 1 through 5.
Sure. Then I saw at the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals."
Right, thank you. So I'm going to switch to Levy here. Levy says this chapter is extremely important because it provides a fitting introduction to the revelation of God's program to be unfolded in the rest of the book, chapters 6 through 22. The scroll had 7 seals. And you know by now, 7's a magic number.
Yeah.
He says Roman law required a last will and testament to be sealed 7 times, as illustrated in the wills of Caesar Augustus and the Emperor Vespasian. So that would be a reason that this scroll is very important scrolls, like the last will and testament, sealed with 7 different scrolls. What does the content in the scroll represent? Various answers have been given to this question. Some believe it represents the new covenant of the promised kingdom. Others say it's the testament or will assuring believers that they have an inheritance reserved for them by God. Another teaching identifies it as the Lamb's book of life, mentioned numerous times in the book of Revelation, and still others see it as God's redemptive program predicted in the Old Testament and fulfilled in the New Testament. And some say it's just the scroll represents a history. This is a nice turn of words, a history of the future. History of the future. So we don't really know what's in the scroll. All we know that it's a really important document. So the angel proclaims in the form of a question, who is worthy to open the scroll and loose its seals? And John's response is sorrowful. He said, and I wept much because no man was found worthy to open and to read the scroll, neither to look on it. There are 3 aspects to the apostle's sorrow. He weeps over the moral inability of mankind to open the scroll. He weeps because the world would never know the contents of the scroll if it couldn't be opened. And still others believe he wept because without the scroll being open, God's program would not be fulfilled. But do not be concerned. Immediately an elder consoled John and commanded him, "Weep not. One has been found to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." And those words turned John from sorrow to joy. So, can somebody read 6 through 10? Maybe Peg, can you read chapter 5, 6 through 10?
Then I saw between the throne and the 4 living creatures, and among the elders, a lamb, standing as if it had been slaughtered, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of the one who was seated on the throne. When he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell before the Lamb, each holding a harp and set golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. They sing a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals, for you were slaughtered, and by your blood you ransomed for God saints from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests serving our God, and they will reign on earth. Was that, how far was I supposed to go?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So,
thanks be to God.
Yeah. So here's this is Barclay again. Here's the supreme moment of this vision, the emergence of the Lamb in the scene of heaven. The Lamb's one of the great characteristic ideas of Revelation, in which Jesus Christ is so named no fewer than 29 times. The word that John uses for the Lamb is not used of Jesus Christ anywhere else in the New Testament plan. And he refers to Jeremiah when Jeremiah says, I was like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter. Jeremiah 11:19. So the Lamb still bears the marks of having been slain. The same Lamb with the marks of sacrifice still on it is the Lamb with the 7 horns and the 7 eyes. The 7 horns stand for omnipotence, all powerful, the possession of infinite power. In the Old Testament, the horn stands for 2 things. First, it stands for power. Second, it stands for honor. Yeah. So here is the great paradox. The Lamb bears the sacrificial wounds on it, but at the same time, it's clothed with the very might of God, which can now shatter its enemies. The Lamb has 7 horns. Number 7 stands for perfection. No one can withstand the power of the Lamb. The Lamb has 7 eyes. The eyes are the spirits which are dispatched into the earth. The picture comes from Zechariah. There, the prophet sees the 7 lamps, which are the eyes of God, which range through the whole earth. This stands for the omniscience of God, the all-knowing power, quality of God, his infinite knowledge. In an almost crude way, it says there's no place on earth which is not under the eye of God. If you remember, I think it's Psalm 139, where can I flee from your power? If I go down to the grave, you're there. And if I go up to the heavens, you're there also. So here's a tremendous picture of Christ. He is the fulfillment of all the hopes and dreams of Israel. For he is the Lion of Judah and the root of David. The tragedy has turned to triumph and the shame to glory. And he's the one whose all-conquering might no one can withstand, and whose all-seeing eye no one can escape.
I think it's amazing because so often and the vision of power and the animal that you would pick to go to protect you would never be a lamb. It would always be a lion. It would be something fierce and protective, and yet God sends a lamb as the symbol of, or they write about the lamb being the symbol of peace and obviously gentle as opposed to ferocious.
Other thoughts? We moved on to chapter 6.
We're moving really fast.
About verses 11.
If we could, let's get, no, I'm sorry. We need to read verses 11 through 14. Barb, you want to read chapter 5, verses 11 to 14? Are you there?
Which Laura?
Rachel, yes, I had to get off. Oh.
Okay.
Did you say Barb?
Which
Barb?
Laura? We've got 2 Lauras. I'll be glad to read it.
Okay, you read it.
We can let Laura Flaherty read the next part.
Okay.
Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels surrounding the throne, and the living creatures and the elders. They numbered myriads and thousands of thousands, singing with full voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slaughtered to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea, and all that is in them singing, "To the one seated on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and forever." And the 4 living creatures said, "Amen." And the elders fell down and worshiped.
Thank you. So this is the song of the angels. The chorus of praise is taken up by the countless hosts of the angels of heaven. We've repeatedly seen how John takes his language from the Old Testament, and here there is in his memory David's great thanksgiving to God, which was from 2 Chronicles. Now the angels sing of the possessions of Christ in his glory, 7 great possessions that belong to the risen Lord. To him belongs power, to him belongs the riches, to him belongs the wisdom, to him belongs the strength, to him belongs the honor, the glory, and the blessing. And then we hear every created creature singing this song, blessing and honor and glory and dominion forever and ever to him who sits upon the throne and to the Lamb. The creatures that are in heaven add their praise. Who are they? Who are the creatures in heaven? More than one answer has been given. One is the birds of the air. The very singing of the birds is a song of praise. It's been suggested that the reference is to the sun, the moon, and the stars, the lights of the sky. It's been suggested that the phrase gathers up every possible being in heaven, the living creatures, the elders, the great numbers of angels, and every other heavenly being. It sounds like St. Francis in the song of song to the sun and the moon. The creatures which are beneath the earth add their praise. That can only mean the dead who are in Hades. And here is something totally new. The Old Testament, the idea is that the dead are separated altogether from God and from human beings and live a shadowy existence. Here, Revelation is saying those people are still part of creation. One of the great images of the resurrection that I recall seeing is particularly in Turkey is the first thing Jesus does is he goes down to Hades and he opens the gate. And the first people to come out are Adam and Eve. The first sinners are the first people released from Hades to heaven.
That's good.
Yeah, they've been waiting a while.
So are you saying, Toby, are you saying they use the FIFO system of inventory from the very beginning of time?
Right, first in, first out. Exactly.
First in, first out.
FIFO, only an accountant could come up with that. Thank you. So here's a vision which sweeps all this away. Not even the land of the dead is beyond the reign of the risen Christ. Even from beyond death, the chorus of praise rises to him. The picture here is an all-inclusive one of nature praising God. Then he says the noblest song of praise comes from the Apocrypha. In the Septuagint, there is an edition of Daniel called the Song of the Three Children. And it's really a lot like St. Francis. O ye sun and moon, bless ye the Lord. Praise and exalt him above all forever. O ye stars of heaven. O every shower and dew, bless ye the Lord. O the wind. And it could just keep on going and going.
Toby, before we go on, I'd like to note the magic number 7 was almost indicated by you by hand signals. You started counting them: power, wealth, wisdom, might, honor, glory, and blessing. And those all added up to 7.
Exactly. And 7 is the whole number, right? The complete. It's everything there is. Thank you. Other thoughts? Okay, Colin, since you're on, why don't you go ahead and read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 6?
I will. Revelation 6, the 7 seals. 1. Then I saw the Lamb open one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures call out as with a voice of thunder, "Come." I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow. A crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer.
Thank you. So here we start getting into a little more complicated symbols. Hang on, I can't find my, I've lost my note. So the Oh, here we go.
Blue, no.
I apologize. I got too many things going on here.
Me too. I've got 5 papers all telling me different stuff. The horse, something about the
So Barclay says the origin of this vision is in Zechariah 6, 1-8. Zechariah sees 4 horses which were let loose upon the earth to deal out vengeance in Babylon and Egypt and the nations which have oppressed God's people. These are the 4 winds of heaven going out after presenting themselves before the Lord of all the earth. Horses stand for the 4 mighty winds which God is about to let loose. The 4 horses and their riders stand for four great destructive forces which in the times before the end are to be dispatched against the evil world by the holy wrath of God. And so the white horse, which is the first horse, who do the horse and the rider represent? It has been suggested that the rider of the white horse is the victorious Christ himself. But the passage we're studying here is telling of woe upon woe and disaster upon disaster. Any picture of the victorious Christ is quite out of place in it. The picture tells of the coming not of the victor Christ, but of the terrors of the wrath of God. So while we might jump to the conclusion that the guy on the white horse is not the Lone Ranger, but it's Christ himself, that, according to Barclay, would be incorrect. And I think Levy says the same thing. Without any doubt, the white horse and its rider stand for conquest and war. When a Roman general celebrated a triumph, that is when he paraded through the streets of Rome with his armies and captives and his booty, after some great victory, his chariot was drawn by a white horse, the symbol of victory. So the white horse and its rider with the bow stand for militarism and conquest. This is interesting. Here is something which has taken a long time to learn. Military conquest has been presented as glamorous, but it is always a tragedy. First, among the tragic news of the end of the end time, John sets the white horse and the man with the bow, the vision of the tragedy of the violence of warfare. So, Irv, can you do chapter 6, verses 3 and 4?
How did I get past 4 and not ask the question?
Okay. Irv?
He's blocked. I think he's muted.
Maybe. Irv, you want to read verses 3 and 4?
Yeah, I was reading. I just forgot I was on thing. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature call out, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people would slaughter one another, and he was given a great sword. Is
Thank
this
you.
the devil?
Go ahead. Let's go ahead.
Yeah.
Did you want me to go on?
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
So the function of the second horse and its rider is to take peace from the earth. They stand for the destructive strife, which sets individual against individual, nation against nation in a chaos of tragic destruction. John was writing at a time when the destructive conflict was tearing the world apart. In the 30 years before the reign of Herod the Great, in Palestine alone, no fewer than 100,000 had perished in revolutions. In the Jewish pictures of the end time, an essential element is the complete disintegration of all human relationships. Every person's hand is against the hand of their neighbor. And that actually comes from Zechariah 14. So the vision of the end was a vision of a time when all human relationships would be destroyed and the world would become a seething cauldron of embittered hate. That seething cauldron is probably why the horse is red.
Is there a connection to the devil here? Being red?
I don't think so. I think it's just the blood red. It's just blood.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of blood in the course of these events.
Well, maybe that's why the devil's always depicted as being red.
Yeah, it could be the other way around. Exactly. Yeah. Peg, I see you. Can you read verses 5 and 6?
Still in chapter 6, right?
When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature call out, "Come." I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's pay, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay. But do not damage the olive oil and the wine."
Thank you. So John's giving an account here, not of the end of things, but of the signs and events which precede the end. So here we've got a black horse and its rider that represent famine, a famine which is very severe and causes great hardship, but which is not desperate enough to kill. There is wheat, but at a prohibitive price. And the luxury things, the wine and the oil, are not affected. As Barclay goes on, the 3 main crops of Palestine were corn, wine, and oil. And it is these 3 which are always mentioned when the crops of the land are being described. The rider of the horse had the crossbeam of a balance in his hand. In the Old Testament, the phrase "to eat bread by weight" indicates the greatest scarcity. And he says it's not entirely abnormal that there should be wine and oil when there is no corn. The olive tree and the vine were much more deeply rooted than corn, and they could withstand a drought which would wipe away the corn crop. And there's so many olive trees. If you go to the Holy Land, there are just olive trees everywhere, all different sorts of olive trees. But it's a situation in which the wine and the oil were plentiful and corn prohibitively dear, would be the equivalent in one in which luxuries were plentiful and necessities scarce. What John is foretelling is a situation in which man's whole working wage would be needed to buy enough corn for himself for a day, leaving absolutely nothing to buy any of the other necessities of life and absolutely nothing for his wife and family. He goes on, this passage finds an amazing echo in certain events during the reign of Domitian at the time when John was writing. There was a very serious shortage of grain and also an excess of wine. Domitian took the drastic step of establishing a law stating that no fresh vineyards should be planted and half the vineyards in the provinces should be cut down. In response to this order, the people of the province of Asia, in which John was writing, came very near to rebelling, for their vineyards was one of their principal sources of revenue. Domitian withdrew his order and actually created a new law stating that those who allowed their vineyards to go out of cultivation would be prosecuted. That's pretty interesting. So this is a picture of famine alongside luxury. There's always something radically wrong with a situation in which some have too much and others have too little. And some see our situation today as being similar to that. So therefore, a sort of a indication maybe the end times are coming.
Well, it's been that way for a long, long time. I mean, the rich always have, the rich in a lot of different ways, but the wealthy, the intelligent, whatever, always seem to have too much, and the poor always are in need. So it is a continual thing, as far as I can see it.
Laura Flaherty, you want to read 7 and 8?
When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature call out, "Come." I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed with him. They were given authority over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with sword, famine, and pestilence, and by the wild animals of the earth.
Thank you. So in this 4th seal, we see a pale horse whose rider's name is Death. this is again Barclay, once again remember that it is speaking not about the final end, but about the signs which precede it. That's why the fourth part of the earth, which is involved in death and disaster, it's only a fourth, it's not the whole earth. It's a terrible time, but it's not the time of total destruction. The picture is a grim one. The horse is pale in color. The passage, well, John was writing in a time when famine and plagues did devastate the world. In this case, he's thinking in terms provided by the Old Testament, which more than once speaks of the 4 deadly judgments. I think this is where the sports fans, I think this is where Grantland Rice got the 4 horsemen from. They were all at Notre Dame, right underneath Touchdown Jesus. Then Barclay talks about that. You hear this in Ezekiel, you hear it again in Leviticus. So John is using a traditional picture of what is to happen when God lets loose its wrath upon his disobedient people. Behind it all is the permanent truth that no individual or nation can escape the consequences of sin. So that's the 4th seal. How about Janie? You want to read the 5th seal? This would be verses 8 through 11.
You're on mute, Janie. Janie
Cruz.
Okay, gotcha. When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked. Oh, this is the same one. There was a. Before me was a. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you said something. This is the one about death and Hades. Okay. You want me to start with number 9?
Verse 9, verses 9 through 11.
Okay. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the full number of their fellow servants, their brothers and sisters, were killed just as they had been.
Thank you. So this one is sort of human. There's sort of a real human quality in these guys saying, how long are we going to have to wait for you to wreak vengeance on everybody else that was bad to us? So it's a vision of the souls of those who died for their faith. And the word, the Greek word for witness is actually martyr. I mean, it's the word that became killed for the faith. Jesus left his followers no doubt about the suffering and the martyrdom they would be called on to endure. He says, they will hand you over to be tortured and will put you to death, and you will be hated. You'll be hated of all nations because of my name. That's from each of the 4 Gospels. The day would come when those who killed Christians would think they were serving God in doing so. The idea of an altar in heaven is one that occurs more than once in Revelation. It occurs several times. It's the consistent idea of those who wrote about the tabernacle in the temple, that the pattern of all holy things already existed in heaven. The souls of those who have been killed, they're beneath the altar. The picture is taken directly from the sacrificial ritual of the temple. For the Jews, the most sacred part of any sacrifice was the blood that drips down from the altar underneath the altar. The blood was regarded as being life, and the life belonged to God. This is the key to understanding the meaning of the passage here. The souls of the martyrs are beneath the altar. That is to say, their lifeblood has been poured out as an offering to God. And he says there's a great and uplifting truth here. When a good person dies for the sake of goodness, it may look like tragedy, like the waste of a fine life, like the work of evil people, and indeed it may be all those things. But every life laid down for right and truth and God is ultimately more than any of these things. It's an offering made to God. So that's the 5th seal. about the sixth seal? Somebody read 12 to 14. Judy Gray, you want to read verses 12 to 14?
Judy, you're on mute.
Yeah, you need to unmute yourself.
Judy, you're on mute.
Yes, I can't hear it. Judy Gray, you're mute. She don't know how to read.
Do you want me to read it?
Judy,
yeah, sure.
You're on mute.
Helen, you want to read 12 to 14? Ah.
You're on mute, Helen.
You're on mute too.
I can do it.
Unmute. All right, there I go.
There we go.
All right, so when he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that was being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. And the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?
Thank you. John here is using pictures very familiar to Jewish readers. The Jews always regarded the end as a time when the earth would be shattered and there would be cosmic upheaval and destruction. In the picture, there are, as it were, 5 elements which can be abundantly illustrated from the Old Testament. There's the earthquake, there's the darkening of the sun and the moon, there's the falling of the stars. To the Jews, this idea was especially terrible, for the order of the heavens was the very guarantee of the unchanging faithfulness of God. There's a rolling up of heaven. It rolls up like a scroll. And then there's the moving of the hills and of the islands of the sea. The mountains will tremble and the hills will be moved. John saw a time when the most unshakable things would be shaken, and when even rocky islands like Patmos would be lifted from their foundations. Strange as John's pictures may seem to us, there's not a single detail which is not also found in the pictures of the end in the Old Testament and the books written between the Testaments. We must not think that these pictures are to be taken literally. Their point is that John is taking every terrifying thing that can be imagined and piling them all together to give a picture of the terrors of the end of time. What matters is the terrors which John and the Jewish seers foresaw when God would invade the earth when the time was coming to an end. So that's it. It's the end of time. All of this stuff rolls up. It's going to be over. The passage has, this is the last part, the passage has 2 significant things to say. It's universal. Verse 15 speaks of the kings, the captains, the great ones, the rich, the strong, the slave, and the free, which includes the whole fabric of human society. When the day of the Lord comes, John sees people seeking somewhere to hide. Here's the great truth that the first instinct of sin is to hide. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve sought to hide themselves. The terrible thing about sin is it makes people fugitives from God, and the supreme thing about the work of Jesus Christ is it puts people into relationship with God in which they no longer need to hide, knowing they can throw themselves on the love and mercy of God. It's from the wrath of the Lamb that the people flee. Here's the paradox. We do not readily associate wrath with the Lamb, but rather gentleness and kindness. But the wrath of God is the wrath of love, which is not out to destroy, but even in anger is out to save those who it loves. Wonderful thought. God wins in the end.
Toby, I know we're really short on time, but I have a different commentary
Sure.
And it gives a little bit of historic background, which I thought was interesting. That
right.
during John's life, there were earthquakes in AD 60, defeat of the Roman army in AD 62, persecution of the Christians and the fire of Rome in AD 64, the 4-year horror of the Jewish war, which ended in AD 70 with Jerusalem in ruins, suicide of Nero in AD 68, political chaos with 4 claimants to the throne. And for the whole world, there was the Roman world, there was a tramp of marching armies, the eruption of Vesuvius in 79, which obliterated resorts, grain famine in AD 92. And so all of this was actually going on in the few years before he wrote this.
Right, right. And so many people over the years have seen in the events of today, and whether it's the 20s or the 30s or the 40s or 50s today, these things that they saw as similar. But if you think about all the things that you just mentioned about the Roman world of this age, we talked a little bit about the earthquakes last week, that earthquakes are just strange to us because they're so, I mean, they're relatively rare, but in this part of the world, they were very common. So people were always living with, well, there still are places in the world where people live with the threat of earthquakes every day. So it really was a tumultuous world that John was writing in. And so that's where a lot of this would have come from. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we go to chapter 7 real quick?
Well, I have a question. When literalists read Revelation, do they, I mean, I'm just asking because I don't know, do they interpret it the same way, or do they think it's actually what happened?
Yeah, there are some people, we talked about this in the first class. On the one hand, you've got people that say it's all symbolic, it's all metaphorical. On the other hand, there are people who believe that this is truly a vision that will literally come true someday. And the stars falling from the heavens may be nuclear bombs or something, but stars are going to fall from the heavens. So there are people that believe that all of this is a literal prophecy of the end time. And then there's everybody in between. Okay.
I often wonder how they think about things when they think everything is literal. If it's, how they make do with what's written there. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. David Jones, hi. Why don't you read the first 8 verses of chapter 7?
Okay, got it. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth so that no wind could blow on earth or sea or against any tree. I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to damage earth and sea, saying, "Do not damage the earth or the sea or the trees until we have marked the servants of our God with a seal on their foreheads." And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000, sealed out of every tribe of the people of Israel. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000 sealed. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. From the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. From the tribe of Levi, 12,000. From the tribe of Issachar, 12,000. From the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. From the tribe of Joseph, 12,000. And from the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 sealed.
Thank you. You were lucky to get all those names.
Yeah, right.
So Barclay says, before we deal with the chapter in detail, John is seeing the vision of the last terrible days, and in particular, the Great Tribulation, which is to come, a final assault by every evil power and final devastation of the earth. It's to play their part in this devastation that the winds are waiting, but for a little while, they're being held back. For this time of terror and devastation comes, the faithful are to be sealed with the seal of God in order that they may survive it. Sort of like the Passover, sort of like you hear in baptism, you're sealed by the Holy Spirit and marked as God's own forever. It's not that they will be exempt from the devastation, but they're to be brought safely through it. So we hear this 144,000, which is 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Again, you could take that literally. Some people do take it literally. 144,000 people, though, in the time of the Romans, or the time that John is writing, is a huge number of people. Whereas in today's world, it's a relatively small group of people. So I think most people would take that to being, take those numbers to mean it's just a great number of people. Going back to the four winds, it's the belief of the ancient people that the winds which came from due north, south, east, and west were all favorable winds. Those which blew diagonally across the earth were harmful. That's why the angels are at the corners of the earth. They're about to loose the winds which blow diagonally. There's a common belief that all the forces of nature are under the charge of angels. These angels are told to restrain the wind until the work of sealing the faithful has been completed, which is a common theme throughout the Old Testament. It's difficult for many of us to understand that those who live in the temperate countries do not know the terror of the wind. But there's something here far more reaching than that and more characteristic of Jewish thought. The Jews knew nothing about secondary causes. We say that atmospheric conditions, variations in temperature, land and mountain configurations cause certain things to happen. The Jews put it all down to the direct action of God. They simply said, God sent the rain, God made the wind to blow, God thundered, God sent his lightning. So here's the number of the faithful. Two things are about to be said about the number, 144,000. It's quite certain it does not stand for the number of the faithful in every day and generation. The 144,000 stands for those who in the time of John are sealed and preserved from the Great Tribulation. It stands not for limitation, but for completeness and perfection, made up of 12 multiplied by 12, the perfect square, and then made even more inclusive by being multiplied by 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
This does not tell us that the number of the saved will be very small. It tells us the number of the saved.
Time to go?
No, in about 10 minutes.
Okay. Anything I need to know about?
Yeah.
I've heard the phone ring 2 or 3 times.
Spam risk.
Oh.
Why are you in here?
So this didn't bother you?
Oops.
Happy, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Betsy was knocking on the door.
Okay.
With 7 trumpets.
So yeah, tell her to knock 7 times.
Okay. She's standing right here, so you just told her.
Okay. So somebody read verses 9 and 10. Just those last couple little things.
On chapter 7?
Yeah.
9 and 10. Okay, Kate, where are they? 7, 8, 9. After this,
all the way to the end. Go 9 to 17.
Do what? I'm in chapter 9, right?
Yeah. Chapter 7, verses 9 through 17.
Oh, chapter 7. Okay. Well, it's got to be in here. It's in the Bible. To start with, and this I looked, and behold, a green multitude, which no man, is that where it is?
Yeah.
Okay. After that I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no man could number, from every nation, from all tribes, and all people, and all tongues, standing before the throne, and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God, who sits upon the throne, and to the Lord. And all the angels stood around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanks and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might to our God, who forever and ever. Amen.
Right.
Am I done? Am I done?
No, that's good. That's good. So,
okay.
So here we've got the beginning of the vision of the future blessedness of the martyrs. There's encouragement. They endure to the end. Glory will be worth all the suffering. You remember that was in all of the 7 letters to the churches. The number of martyrs is too great to be counted. This may well be a memory of the promise that God made to Abraham and his descendants.
I wrote that down.
The sands of the stars in the sky. So, the picture is of a series of great circles, one inside another, made up of the inhabitants of heaven. On the outer ring are the angels, near the throne are the 24 elders, still nearer the 4 living creatures, and in front of the throne are the white-robed martyrs. So it's this huge gathering of people. The martyrs have just sung their shout of praise to God, and the angels take that song of praise and make it their own. So let it be, say the angels. They say amen to the martyrs' praises. And then in 13 and 14, one of the elders said to me, do you know who these are who are clothed in white robes and where they came from? And John naturally says, me? You know, you're the guy that knows all the answer here. And the answer is, these are they who came out of the Great Tribulation. John is convinced that he and his people are standing at the end time of history, and the end time is to be terrible beyond all imagining. The whole point of his vision is that beyond that terrible time, glory will follow. So the great crowd of blessed ones are in white robes. Again, we've heard that's the sign of purity. In the ancient world, it was forbidden to approach God with robes which were not clean. When Christians were baptized, they were dressed in new white robes. Those robes were taken to symbolize new life, and to soil them was a symbolic way of expressing failure to be true to the baptismal vows.
I'm sorry, it's out.
What else? You got any questions? Bob Brown, I see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want me to read?
I think we're to the end of chapter 7.
Well, I had 3 more verses, but that's okay.
Okay, read the last 3 verses.
For this reason, they are before the throne of God and worship him day and night within his temple. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to the springs of the water of life, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Those are words we hear in the funeral service.
That's right.
Very familiar words in the funeral service, where God will wipe away every tear from their eye.
Where did he just read, please? I'm apparently jumping chapters I'm not supposed to. What chapter? Where was that?
The end of the chapter you read.
Very ending of chapter 7. At 7:17 is for the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd.
Okay. I just flipped to the next.
Living water, and God will wipe away every tear.
Okay.
So there's a spiritual promise here, the promise of the ultimate satisfying of the hunger and thirst of the human soul. But this is Barclay, but it may well be that we should not entirely spiritualize the passage. In the early days, many of the church's members were slaves. They knew what it was to be hungry all the time. They knew what thirst was. They knew what it was for the pitiless sun to blaze down upon their backs as they labored, forbidden to rest. Truly for them, heaven would be a place where hunger was satisfied, thirst was quenched, and the heat of the sun no longer tortured them. The promise of this passage is that the end of the world's hunger, the world's pain, and the world's sorrow is in Christ. And this is so reminiscent of all the Negro spirituals of the that were born really in the
Ezekiel saw the wheel. Lay up in the middle of the air.
Toby, I note that in chapter 6, its caption is the 7 seals. However, in 6, we only get 6 seals, and then we take a break for 7 to get 144,000 people being sealed, which is a little different from the seals on the scroll. And then next week we'll get to chapter 8 to read about the 7th seal.
That's right, and some of the commentary on that is that you need a break. You need a sort of an interlude before the great shebang, which is coming in the 7th seal. That's the big shebang of this particular part of Revelation. And that will come in chapter 8, which is the beginning of next week. And we'll do 8, 9, 10, 11. We're not too bad. We're 15 minutes over, but if you have any question you don't think we got covered today, it's just part of the deal. We're going to have to go fast. But if you have any question that you feel we didn't cover, please send me an email and I'll try to address it between now and next week.
Thank you, Toby.
Thank you, Toby.
All right. We'll see you next week at chapter 8.
God willing.
Thank you, Toby.
Thank you.
Thanks, Toby.
And the Indians don't rise.